Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Need to Know, a series of video interviews with companies who are shaping, creating, and innovating in the games industry today, and whose work will have a huge impact going forwards into the future. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Silv Greenfield from Henpicked, here to talk to us today about menstruation and menopause and why they belong in the workplace. Silv, it's lovely to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No worries. Before we get going, to kick things off, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and how you became a trainer in menopause and menstruation in the workplace?
Yeah, sure. Actually, my main business, I'm a holistic and health and wellness coach, and I'm also a Henpicked licensed trainer. And essentially, I specialize in menopause and menstruation in the workplace. And really, the goal there is to kind of help organizations create environments where people feel comfortable about talking these subjects. It's about kind of creating awareness and education about how people can thrive throughout their careers, throughout those different stages of their health. And the kind of story behind my own journey really kind of stems from my personal and professional experience, really. And I guess my professional frustration really with the lack of support and sometimes kind of the fact that these issues are overlooked in the workspace. And I was in the games industry, as you know, for a very long time. And when I kind of started experiencing my initial kind of symptoms when I hit perimenopause, it really kind of had quite a profound effect on me. And as such, actually, I then obviously diversified and retrained. So that was the silver lining from that personal experience. But, essentially what I want to do is kind of create this kind of mission to kind of advocate for people that perhaps don't have a voice, but also actually kind of more in practical terms, kind of encourage organizations to think about training, kind of look at that kind of policy support and, have these honest conversations around this subject, which is becoming ever more important and at the forefront of kind of those conversations, really.
Absolutely, I think it's crucial, really, especially opening up dialogue on these things. It's really important to ultimately for everyone to have a voice, really. So, fantastic. Well, from a sort of employment or employer's perspective, I mean, why is it now more than ever that they should be sort of prioritizing support around menstruation and menopause?
Yeah, good question. I think, I think the thing that I really wanted to highlight at the moment is that the Employment Right Bill is currently going kind of through government, and it's at the kind of House of Lords stage, and I think they're almost at report stage. So, that's really, kind of thundering along and kind of making quite a big kind of progression through that kind of process. And for anybody that doesn't know that, this is basically the legislation piece around kind of strengthening that employment rights in the UK and for employees and employers, essentially. And I think what that means specifically around that women's health piece is, that, individuals really need to be thinking about that equality action plan. And that really affects at the moment employers that have over 250 employees. So, it's a case of that, menopause and menstruation really needs to become a point of conversation, and it can no longer be kind of sidelined. So that is the kind of, for me, the kind of the number one reason. But, I think there are other compelling reasons really where employers really need to be thinking about and kind of delving into. And, certainly the demographic, women aged between the ages of 45 and 60 is the fastest growing demographic in the UK. We've got around 5 million kind of women of that age group that are currently in the workplace. So, I guess that's kind of a big chunk of our workforce that we really need to be thinking about. I think secondly, there is kind of a cultural and culture shift around it. I think people are kind of, I think employees or anyone that's looking for new employment, they're kind of demanding that some of these inclusive elements are part of the kind of offering that employers are giving right now. So, it's kind of part of that wider well-being kind of discussion, and that whole DE&I kind of piece that employers are kind of thinking about. And I think finally, really, a lot of people are speaking up. So the likes of myself, with Henpicked, we're making great strides in kind of reducing the taboo around talking about some of these subjects. And I think it's really kind of important that employers think about that, because otherwise they're just going to get left behind. And I think, from a kind of an attraction of, talent, that's going to be a key piece moving forward for them. So yeah, I think they're kind of some of the key things that, compelling reasons why people need to be talking about this.
Definitely, lots to think about there. So from I mean, you mentioned from an employment law, from a legal standpoint, then specifically around in the UK, what would you say the obligations or the risks that organisations need to be aware of, and ideally looking to mitigate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, legally, menopause and menstruation aren't sort of standalone protected characteristics under the sex, age, and disability discrimination under the Equality Act. But I think, it's fair to say that we have seen some successful, very high profile tribunal cases where, kind of employees have won against their employers, and it's been against that kind of menopause related symptoms specifically. And I think one of the examples that I kind of wanted to share today was the Rooney versus Leicester City Council case, which basically established legal precedent that menopausal symptoms can constitute a disability under that Equality Act. And, whilst it isn't actually a disability, I think it's important to state that some of those symptoms over a very long period of time can be very debilitating and can affect somebody's ability to work on a day-to-day basis. So it has such a big impact. So, again, from an employer's perspective, I think that there is a legal obligation and duty to ensure, health, safety, and, well-being at work. And, and I think that that means that they have to be proactive when it comes to these issues. And I think, that example that I've given, that means that, that they run the risk of legal action if they don't kind of take that seriously. And, on top of that, there's also that kind of reputation. Do you want to be an organization that isn't actually championing some of these issues? And again, we talked about that retention of staff. I think it's really important that, people safeguard that amazing talent that they already have in their organizations. So yeah, I think that kind of covers really what that looks like.
Absolutely. I mean, you've already hinted at some of these aspects, I suppose, but beyond sort of pure compliance, what would you say was the sort of business case for an employer? I mean, you know, understanding some of the sort of hidden costs of not taking this seriously would be helpful from your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to say that, there aren't always kind of very obvious, visible kind of costs to a business. But I think, things like increased absenteeism. I think you're going to get, individuals that might be, have lower productivity because of the symptoms, that the way they're manifesting themselves in the workspace. I think you're going to get those individuals, the presenteeism. So those that are kind of, they're not proactively, kind of looking to improve some of those symptoms because they're worried about that perceived absent, if they're not actually in the workspace. And I think, that loss of talent again, I think when we think about when this kind of happens in life, you're looking at individuals that are going to be highly skilled, highly experienced, and, might be in senior leadership roles. So I think it's really, really key that, those businesses kind of take that into account. I think, research shows us that, 1 in 4 kind of consider leaving their jobs because of their kind of symptoms that they're experiencing, and 1 in 10 actually do. And I was that statistic. I kind of changed my life specifically, and it was kind of a contributing factor to me leaving the sector, because there just wasn't that kind of support and awareness around that piece. So I think it's also important to say that on the flip side, that if organisations are offering menopause or menstruation support and awareness in the workplace, they're going to see better engagement. They're going to see, higher loyalty rates. They're going to see, great performances. It's not just the right thing to do. It's actually, really smart business. I think that kind of covers that really.
No, definitely. That makes an awful lot of sense. So, as well, I suppose it'd be helpful to sort of consider, for companies addressing these issues. I mean, how would you see that reflected in the company's sort of social responsibility and the values that they put forward?
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of really signals, it's a really clear signal that actually organizations, kind of, um, it shows the company value in kind of looking after their people holistically. And it shows a really serious kind of approach to inclusion. And it's not just about kind of a checkbox exercise. Um, I think, it kind of aligns with kind of that ESG goals, so kind of that environmental, social, and governance that some kind of organisation take very seriously. That whole gender equality kind of initiatives that many would be looking at. And I think, just from kind of a well-being kind of strategy, I just think it really reflects kind of an employer's kind of progressive kind of approach. It's kind of human-centered. So kind of remembering that actually behind every title and every job, there is a human, and, there are struggles inside and outside of the workspace. And I think it kind of highlights that those are the organizations that are kind of willing to tackle these issues, and they're not frightened to tackle these issues. So I think that really kind of would assist in that kind of social responsibility, and actually really kind of flag what those immense values that I think a lot of employees and people that are seeking work are looking for now.
Absolutely. No, that makes an awful lot of sense. I mean, from Yuki's perspective, and mine as well, we're quite big on demystifying elements here, demystification. It's quite interesting to hear maybe some of the sort of common mistakes or myths that you've encountered when working with organisations on this subject matter.
Yeah, I think for me, again, it's that kind of going back to that checkbox exercise. This isn't a, one awareness day or one kind of line in a kind of HR policy. This really is about kind of embedding change in the culture of a workspace. And that's only done through kind of education and kind of manager training, kind of helping those individuals that, kind of look after teams on how to have those constructive conversations and not to be scared about having those conversations. It's about creating those supporting frameworks so that, there is signposting. It's kind of within those policies about how, there are kind of workplace adjustments for those that might be experiencing these issues and symptoms. And really, for me, it's about kind of creating those psychologically safe spaces so that, people can come to the workspace as their whole selves and not have to kind of hide behind a mask or a facade, because that's what they think they have to do because they're frightened to kind of approach the subject. It isn't just a health concern. This really is about kind of, it is really a business issue, and it will be impacting individuals' kind of performance, and, it will impact things like retention and attraction. And, and actually it is about that, that culture piece. It's about embedding that kind of philosophy that it's okay to talk about this stuff. We will support you, and there are kind of frameworks in place for you.
Definitely, I think especially given that this is a fiercely creative industry, it's super important to be able to, be your entire self at work.
Absolutely.
um, yeah, fantastic. Okay, so thinking sort of practically then, what's a really simple first step that a company could take to move in the right direction on this area?
Yeah, I think, I think the most basic and simplest thing is to just start having the conversation. And that can be as simple as having like a lunch and learn, or kind of maybe putting surveys out to your employees and staff just to see, anonymously, obviously, because a lot of people do worry about kind of sharing their thoughts. But again, kind of really ascertaining what matters to them, and, kind of trying to get to the bottom of some of the aspects of what's worrying them in the workspace. I think aside from that, things like training, obviously, which is, something that I provide, both from a colleague and manager perspective, kind of creating support groups within the organization so that there is a safe space for individuals to ask questions that they may not ordinarily want to ask their line managers, but if there is a kind of a support group or a resource group that is kind of set up, then that's a really, really lovely way to kind of get these conversations started. I think also things like reviewing policies, ask yourself, does, menopause or menstruation health get kind of called out in your policy? If it doesn't, is that something that you can look to kind of remedy and kind of get kind of changed? And I think it's kind of things like, kind of sharing that information with your staff. So it's not a case of creating a policy and then putting it in a top drawer. You have to signpost this stuff and ensure that everybody's aware of it. You have regular kind of discussions and opportunities for that education and that training. Yeah, so they're kind of some ideas. And I think, I want to call out the Fawcett report, because there is a lot of great research in that report around this piece. 8 out of 10 women said that their employer hadn't shared information about this stuff, and they hadn't had adequate policies in place. So I think, again, it kind of supports that element of, kind of creating a framework is really kind of at the kind of start of that kind of building that supportive environment for employees.
Absolutely. I'm sure I can find a link to the report and pop it in the video description. Okay, interesting. I think you're absolutely right there on definitely upskilling sort of line managers on this, but also that wider piece of highlighting that if these policies are in place, they need to be sort of signposted to and visible to all, essentially. So yeah, no, that's really, really helpful and an interesting sort of practical take on that side of things. So finally then, I mean, how can people learn more about your work and what you do?
Okay, well, obviously I am on LinkedIn. Obviously now we are also, Henpicked are also a Ukie member, so we'll be flagged within the members area and your website. I also have my own website, silvanagreenfield.com. And just reach out and kind of I can discuss kind of training options, membership options with Henpicked. Obviously Henpicked have their own websites as well, so please, I would encourage you to go on henpicked.net, sorry. And yeah, just kind of, just starting a conversation, send me an email, kind of a DM, whatever, and we can kind of progress from there. But I'm hopefully, kind of doing more conversations with Ukie as well in the future, and kind of expanding on this kind of women's health piece and kind of creating that awareness. So I think there's going to be lots of opportunities to discuss it. Yeah, so there you go.
Fantastic. Yes, I'll pop those links down at the bottom for everyone to take a look at. Yeah, I think this has been really, really fascinating. Thank you so much, Silv. There's lots and lots here to think about, especially for both for large companies and small companies, to be honest with you. So and individuals themselves, maybe to sort of look and see what changes they can make within their organisations. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been really fascinating.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No worries. And thank you as well today to our audience who tuned in to catch this video. There's plenty of other need to know videos out there on our Ukie TV channel on YouTube. Thank you for enjoying this one, and more very soon. Thank you so much.